Paris, France. May 27, 2026. Nearly midnight, inside the Hotel de Crillon, one of the most exclusive hotels overlooking Place de la Concorde. Alex Ila had already changed into sweats. Her racket bags were stacked near the wall. The emotional weight of her first-round loss at Roland Garros still hung heavily over the room. Hours earlier, she had walked off court 14 fighting back tears while thousands of Filipino fans continued chanting her name even after defeat. Most athletes would have wanted silence after a night like that. Instead, at exactly 11:47 p.m., a hotel staff member arrived outside her suite carrying a black delivery case stamped with 3 white stripes. Adidas. That detail alone reportedly stopped everyone in the room. Because Alex Ila had never publicly worn Adidas in her professional career. Since she was a teenager training at the Rafael Nadal Academy, Nike had been part of her identity. The swoosh followed her through junior titles, ITF tournaments, challenger events, and eventually her rise into the WTA spotlight. Fans associated her with Nike the same way they associated certain superstars with signature brands. So when a luxury black case from Adidas appeared at her hotel hours after a painful Grand Slam loss, nobody understood what was happening. Then Ila opened it, and according to people close to the scene, the entire room went silent. Inside sat a pair of custom-made clay court boots reportedly valued at nearly $25,000. Handcrafted, black and gold detailing, her initials stitched into the inner lining. The Philippine sun embroidered near the heel. Paris red clay still brushed lightly across the soles as part of the design concept. But the shoes themselves were only part of the story. Tucked beneath them was a handwritten note. Not a sponsorship contract. Not a promotional campaign. A personal message. And according to multiple reports circulating through tennis media circles afterward, the wording shocked everyone who saw it. Adidas reportedly described the gift not as a partnership offer, but as recognition of impact beyond results. One line from the note spread rapidly online after being leaked through fan accounts. The world noticed what happened after you lost. That sentence changed the entire conversation around Alex Ila overnight. Because this was not about a championship victory. She had not reached the second week of Roland Garros. She had not lifted a trophy. In fact, she had exited in the first round. Yet somehow, one of the largest sportswear companies in the world was responding to her defeat as if it had become one of the defining moments of the tournament. And honestly, they may not have been wrong. The footage of Ila thanking Filipino fans through tears after her loss had already exploded online before the Adidas package even arrived. Clips from Court 14 generated tens of millions of views across social media platforms. French broadcasters replayed scenes of supporters chanting "Laban Alex" long after the match ended. International sports pages began calling her one of the emotional centerpieces of Roland Garros, despite the early exit. That level of attention changes things fast in professional sports. Marketing analysts immediately started discussing whether Adidas saw Ila as something bigger than a tennis prospect. Younger fans connected with her emotionally. Overseas Filipino communities rallied around her globally. Her matches generated engagement numbers many higher-ranked players could not touch. Even in defeat, she commanded headlines. And then came the part that fueled even more speculation. Nike said nothing. No statement. No social media response. No public congratulations after the viral Roland Garros moments. The silence became impossible to ignore once footage of the Adidas delivery leaked online and crossed 35 million views within days. Tennis fans instantly split into camps. Some believed Adidas was making a bold move to recruit one of the sport's fastest-rising global stars while she was emotionally vulnerable after a devastating loss. Others argued the gesture felt deeper than business, less like a sponsorship play and more like recognition that Ila had created something rare in modern sports, emotional connection powerful enough to transcend winning and losing. Because that is what stunned people most about the entire story. A 21-year-old player loses in the first round of a Grand Slam, yet somehow becomes one of the biggest conversations in world tennis anyway. Not because of controversy, not because of scandal, because people cared. And as Ila reportedly sat on the edge of her hotel bed, holding those custom boots under the dim lights of the Crillon suite, witnesses describe her reading the note more than once before quietly placing it back inside the box. No dramatic reaction. No screaming. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes the world may suddenly see them very differently than they saw themselves only hours earlier. Because sometimes in sports, the loudest statement is not made after a victory. Sometimes it arrives and the French Open was finished for Alexila, but the emotions from that night in Paris refused to leave with the scoreboard. Inside her hotel room, the silence felt heavier than the crowd noise from Court 14 only a few hours earlier. Her first-round loss to Eva Jovic kept replaying in her head point by point. The missed break chances. The slow starts on serve. The rallies she almost controlled before momentum slipped away. Every athlete understands that feeling after a major defeat, the endless mental replay of moments that cannot be changed. Outside the hotel, Paris was already moving on to the next stars of Roland Garros. The headlines shifted. The tournament schedule rolled forward. But for Ila, the night still felt unfinished. The Philippine flags that had transformed Court 14 into a sea of red, blue, white, and gold were now folded carefully into backpacks and suitcases by fans preparing for flights home. The chants of Laban Alex that shook the stadium earlier in the day had faded into the Paris night air. Supporters who had crossed continents to watch her compete slowly disappeared into train stations, airport terminals, and hotel lobbies across the city. And upstairs in her room, Ila was preparing to leave too. Her flight to Mallorca was scheduled for the next morning. Practice blocks at the Rafael Nadal Academy were already waiting. Clay season adjustments needed work. Her serve still required changes. The disappointment of another difficult result on clay would now follow her back to Spain. On the floor beside her suitcase sat the familiar Nike gear she had worn for years. Shirts neatly folded. Practice kits stacked carefully. The swoosh logo had become part of her identity long before global attention arrived. Nike backed her when she was still a teenage prospect from a country with almost no history in elite women's tennis. Before packed stadiums, before viral moments, before worldwide headlines, that history mattered deeply to her inner circle. Nike had celebrated her milestones quietly over the years. At Wimbledon, they reportedly gifted her a personalized Sajida hair tie inspired by Filipino symbolism. At their Oregon headquarters, custom portraits of her junior achievements were displayed alongside other emerging athletes. Company executives had gradually integrated her into campaigns built around resilience, international growth, and the next generation of women's sports. To Ila, Nike was never just apparel. It represented belief during years when very few people outside the Philippines even knew her name. That is why the midnight Adidas delivery felt so shocking to everyone around her. Not because athletes switch brands. That happens constantly in professional sports. The shock came from timing and emotion. Adidas did not approach her after winning Roland Garros. They reached toward her immediately after one of the most painful defeats of her young career. And suddenly the tennis world started asking uncomfortable questions. Did Adidas see something bigger happening around Alex Ila before everyone else did? Because by the end of that night in Paris, the conversation surrounding her had already changed dramatically. Sports analysts were no longer discussing only rankings and results. They were talking about cultural impact, about audience connection, about the rare ability some athletes have to make people emotionally invest in their journey regardless of wins or losses. That is incredibly rare in tennis. Most first-round losers disappear from public conversation within hours at a Grand Slam. Ila somehow became one of the tournament's most discussed players after losing. Videos of her thanking fans through tears generated millions of views globally. Clips of Filipino supporters chanting her name spread far beyond tennis audiences. French broadcasters openly admitted they had underestimated the movement following her around Europe. And now, one of the world's largest sportswear brands appeared to be responding directly to that momentum. Inside the hotel room, witnesses later described Ila sitting quietly beside her packed luggage after reading the Adidas note several times. No celebration, no immediate excitement, just reflection. Because deep down, she understood the complicated emotions involved. Loyalty mattered to her. So did opportunity. Nike helped build the early stages of her career. Adidas now seemed to be signaling that they believed her future could become even larger than anyone originally imagined. And maybe that is the part of the story that resonated most with fans. A young athlete sitting alone in a Paris hotel room after a heartbreaking loss suddenly realizing that, despite the defeat, the world might actually be paying closer attention to her than ever before. Because sometimes careers do not change after championships. Sometimes they change in the quiet hours immediately after disappointment, when the spotlight unexpectedly grows brighter. For years, Nike had treated Alex Ila like a future investment long before the tennis world fully understood who she was becoming. They featured her in youth campaigns beside rising global stars like Carlos Alcaraz and Aryna Sabalenka. They brought her into the company culture early, quietly building a relationship with a teenager from the Philippines at a time when very few brands saw major commercial value in Southeast Asian tennis. To Ila and her family, that loyalty mattered, which is why what happened inside that Paris hotel room after midnight felt almost unreal. The knock at the door was soft enough that, at first, they nearly ignored it. Alex Ila was exhausted. Her mother, Riza, had already started organizing luggage for the early flight back to Mallorca the next morning. The emotional weight from the Roland Garros loss still lingered heavily inside the room. Neither of them expected visitors. When Riza opened the door, hotel concierge stood waiting in the hallway holding a large black presentation box wrapped in a single white ribbon. No sponsor logos splashed across the front. No cameras. No media team. Just a quiet delivery, and 3 embossed stripes pressed subtly into the side of the case. According to hotel staff later quoted online, the courier reportedly described the package as urgent and insisted it be delivered personally that night. That detail immediately fueled speculation once the story leaked because luxury sports brands rarely make private midnight deliveries without strategic purpose behind them. Riza carried the box carefully to the table while Ila stared at it from across the room. The atmosphere reportedly shifted instantly. Not excitement. Confusion. Because everyone inside that room understood what the 3 stripes meant. Adidas. A direct competitor to the brand that had backed her career since childhood. For a moment, nobody moved. Then her mother reportedly said quietly, "Open it, Anik." Ila untied the ribbon slowly, lifted the lid, and completely froze. Inside the velvet-lined case sat a pair of custom-built Adidas clay court boots unlike anything publicly released during Roland Garros. Tennis insiders later described them as part luxury collectible, part symbolic recruiting pitch. Gold trim wrapped around the edges. Hand-stitched detailing ran across the sides. Tiny Eiffel Tower engravings were pressed directly into the leather panels. Along the heel, embroidered in elegant lettering, were 2 words already emotionally connected to Ila's growing global following. Laban always. Fight always. That detail reportedly hit her hardest, because those were the same words she mouthed toward Filipino fans after her heartbreaking first-round defeat earlier that day. Somehow Adidas had already incorporated the phrase into a personalized gift only hours later, leading many fans online to believe the company had been preparing the package well before the match ended. Then came another stunning detail: the estimated value. Fashion and sportswear analysts later claimed the handcrafted boots were worth nearly $25,000 due to the custom leatherwork, gold finishing, and limited edition design process connected to Adidas's Paris clay collection. Similar luxury athlete exclusives are rarely given to non-sponsored players, especially after tournament losses. That is why the tennis world reacted so strongly once the footage leaked. Because this no longer looked like ordinary marketing. It looked personal. Witnesses later described Ila covering her mouth in disbelief as she lifted one of the boots carefully from the velvet case. For several seconds, she reportedly said nothing at all. Then finally, almost whispering, she turned toward her mother and asked the question everyone online would soon repeat endlessly. "Mama, these are from Adidas. Why would Adidas send me this?" Her mother's answer reportedly came immediately. "Because they want you, Anik. Because they see what Nike sees." That line spread across social media almost as fast as the boots themselves. And honestly, it captured the larger story perfectly. Because by that point, Alex Ila was no longer just another young tennis player trying to climb rankings. She had become something brands spend decades searching for, an athlete capable of building emotional connection powerful enough to transcend results. She lost in the first round at Roland Garros. Yet videos of her thanking fans through tears generated more global engagement than many players still alive in the tournament. Filipino communities rallied around her worldwide. European broadcasters discussed her emotional impact for days afterward. Even casual sports fans with little connection to tennis suddenly knew her name. Adidas clearly noticed. And perhaps most fascinating of all was the silence from Nike afterward. No public response. No statement. No social media acknowledgement of the viral Adidas package. That silence only deepened speculation that one of the biggest sponsorship battles in women's tennis might quietly be beginning behind closed doors. But inside that Paris hotel room, none of that corporate drama seemed to matter in the moment. There was only a tired 21-year-old athlete sitting beside packed luggage after a devastating defeat, staring at a pair of handcrafted boots that seemed to carry a message